Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today we're opening up a story that feels less like a traditional novel and honestly more like a living, breathing organism. You know those stories that aren't just about a single protagonist, but they're about the complex, messy, kind of pulsating system that is a family.
Oh, absolutely. I'm the resident expert here, and I know exactly what you mean. It's the kind of story where you pull one single thread, maybe it's a secret or a sudden realization, and the entire tapestry just bunches up in response.
Exactly, yeah. And that is exactly what we are diving into today. The source material is the novel Hello, Beautiful by Ann Napolitano. Now, if you are a fan of literary fiction, or really, if you've walked past any bookstore in the last year, you have seen this cover. It has been absolutely everywhere.
It really has. But our mission today isn't just to give you the basic plot points you could find on the back jacket. We want to unpack the actual texture of this thing. We are talking about a sweeping saga that spans from 1960 all the way to 2008.
Right. It is a massive canvas. And what is particularly fascinating about this source material is that Napolitano isn't hiding her influences at all. She is explicitly walking in the footsteps of giants here. This novel is a very direct homage to Louisa May Alcott's Little Women.
It is, but, and I think this is crucial for you listening, before everyone starts picturing, bonnets and Civil War letters and snowy New England Christmases, we need to completely reset the scene. This is definitely not 1860s Massachusetts.
Not at all. It is very modern and it is very gritty. It's set in Chicago. Like, you can almost smell the Italian beef sandwiches and the industrial paper mills and that heavy, damp air coming right off Lake Michigan.
Yeah, it takes those classic archetypes of sisterhood, the
Right.
ones we all know, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, and it completely transplants them into a world dealing with basketball, severe depression, unplanned teenage pregnancy, and just the very specific chaos of a working-class neighborhood in Pilsen.
I love that description. It's Little Women with a lot more edges. So here's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to figure out how two completely different worlds collide to create this narrative. In one corner, we have William Waters, who is a man defined by absolute, suffocating silence.
And in the other corner, you have the Padavano sisters. Four very loud, deeply inseparable women who seem to practically share a single nervous system.
And the question at the center of this collision is terrifyingly simple, yet impossible to answer. Can you ever really leave your family behind? Or are we all doomed or maybe blessed to carry them with us forever, no matter how far we run?
That is the core of it right there.
Yeah.
So let's start with the silence. Let's start with World One, which is William Waters. Because to really understand the massive explosion of the Padavano family later on, you have to understand the absolute vacuum that William comes from.
Right. And William's story begins in Boston. And it begins with essentially a ghost.
A literal ghost.
Metaphorically, but in a way that feels heavier than a literal haunting, honestly. William is born into a house that has just lost a 3-year-old girl named Caroline. She died of a fever and a cough, basically while William was being born.
Wow. So he arrives, and his sister leaves. That is a massively heavy trade-off to carry from day one.
It creates a deficit that he just can never fill. The reaction of his parents is what's devastating. They don't just grieve in the way we typically understand grief, with crying and mourning and eventually healing. They completely shut down. They stop functioning as emotional beings.
The source material is so specific about this. It describes the father's face as having never opened again after Caroline died.
That is such a chilling image. A face that never opens again, just completely locked away.
And the mother? She smokes cigarettes, she drinks bourbon, and she looks at William like he is a total stranger. Actually, it's worse than a stranger. To them, William isn't their son. He is simply the person who isn't Caroline.
Right, he becomes an only child in a house that was built for two, and the silence in that house is just oppressive. There is this heartbreaking detail early in the book where William realizes that his parents don't hate him. Exactly. They just don't see him at all.
Yes, he grows up believing he is fundamentally unlovable. Not that he's a bad kid, just that he is invisible. He truly thinks his only value is to take up as little space as possible in the world.
Which is such a profound psychological scar. If you are taught from day one that your existence is an error, or at least a complete irrelevance, you try to minimize your footprint. But William does find a way to exist. He finds basketball.
Now, I want to pause here because for you listeners who aren't sports fans, it is really easy to gloss over the basketball parts as just, character backstory. But Napolitano is doing something very specific here. This isn't your standard glory of the game sports movie trope.
Not at all. It's about noise.
Yeah.
And it's about physics.
Exactly. He goes out to the driveway and he just dribbles for hours and hours.
He is creating the sound of life. because his house is like a tomb. That rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the ball on the concrete is literally the only thing validating his existence. It's a heartbeat he can actually control.
And it becomes his entire identity. He realizes he can be useful on the court. He's not the star shooter. He doesn't have hops, as they say. He can't jump high. He isn't particularly fast.
But he works harder than anyone else out there.
Mm-hmm.
He becomes the guy who sets the screen. He's the guy who passes. It is perfectly consistent with his trauma response, isn't it?
It is perfectly aligned. He doesn't want to be the star. He wants to be the glue. He figures if he makes everyone else look good, maybe they won't notice he's there, or maybe they'll just keep him around because he's useful to them.
And that utility pays off. He gets a basketball scholarship to Northwestern University in Chicago, which effectively allows him to escape that silent house in Boston. But there is that great anecdote about him training in his glasses.
Oh, yes. Taping cardboard to the bottom of his glasses. The Bill Bradley method.
Right. He literally blinds himself to his own feet so he can learn to feel the ball without looking down.
It is a really powerful metaphor for William's early life. He is moving through the world blind, just trying to feel the bounce, trying to keep the rhythm going without crashing into anything. So he escapes Boston, gets on a train to Chicago, and he genuinely thinks he's escaped the silence.
But nature abhors a vacuum, and William is about to be completely filled up by the Padavano force field. Enter Julia Padavano.
Julia is, well, she is a lot.
She really is. She spots him in a history class during their freshman year, and the way she sees him is so telling. She doesn't see a broken, lonely boy. The text says she sees a blank slate.
Julia is very much the Jo March of this section, if we're leaning into that Little Women comparison, but she's also just very deeply the eldest daughter of a chaotic family. She is the rocket. She has a plan for absolutely everything.
She sees William, who is tall, quiet, handsome, and she basically decides on the spot. That's him. That's my husband. That is the father of my children. I can mold him.
And William, he absolutely loves it. He loves that someone is finally telling him where to stand and what to do.
Because it's safer, right? It's much safer than having to decide for himself.
Okay.
He essentially lets her absorb him. And through Julia, he meets the rest of them. He meets the coven.
The coven. I love that they call themselves that. This sisterhood is truly the beating heart of the book.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's the four sisters. We have Julia, the fixer, the incredibly ambitious one. Then we have Sylvie. Sylvie is the dreamer. She's the reader. She works at the library and she kisses boys in the stacks because she's actively practicing for a great love. She wants her real life to feel exactly like a novel.
Then you have the twins, Cecilia and Emmeline. Cecilia is the fierce artist. She sees the whole world in vivid colors. Emmeline is the nurturer, the one who just wants to take care of absolutely everything that breathes.
And they are so inseparable. They have this shared language, this intense physical closeness. The book constantly describes them lying across each other on couches, sharing clothes, finishing each other's sentences. They even explicitly argue over which March sister they are.
Right, Julia and Sylvie both constantly fight over being Jo.
Which is a massive conflict in itself, don't you think?
Yeah.
Because Jo is the main character. Jo is the one who gets out and does something big.
Exactly. They both desperately want to be the writer of the story. But deeper down, beneath the banter, they share a very real fear. Because if they are truly playing out Little Women, then one of them has to be Beth.
The one who dies young.
It hangs over them like a dark prophecy. But for now, in the early parts of the narrative, it's just sibling banter. William walks into this house in Pilsen, and it is absolute, unbridled chaos. And we really have to talk about the parents here, Rose and Charlie, because they are the master architects of this chaos.
Rose, the mother. She is this tiny, rigidly strict woman. And the detail that stuck with me the most about her is the gardening outfit.
The catcher's mask, it's so bizarre, but so perfect.
Right. She wears a full baseball catcher's chest protector and shin guards to garden in the backyard.
She found it in the trash, but think about the incredible symbolism there. She is armored. Rose is a woman who is deeply, profoundly disappointed by her life, by her husband, by her lack of money. She is protecting herself from taking any more hits.
She recites the names of saints when she's angry, too, which is effectively like praying aggressively at her family.
That's exactly what it is. And then there's Charlie, the dad.
Charlie, the lovable, poetry-quoting, alcoholic dreamer. He works at a paper plant, which is an incredibly grueling job, but he basically lives for poetry. And he is the source of the book's title.
Hello, beautiful.
It is how he greets his daughters.
Yeah.
Every single time he sees them. And the text makes a very specific point to say that when Rose looks at the girls, she sees what they've achieved or what they have failed to do. She sees their utility and their flaws.
But when Charlie looks at them and says, "Hello, beautiful," he really sees them. He sees their core essence.
He validates them completely, even though his own life is falling apart.
He loves quoting Walt Whitman to them. "I am large, I contain multitudes." He teaches his girls that it is perfectly okay to be messy, to be big, to be fully human. And William, poor, silent, invisible William, is just absolutely basking in this warmth. He marries Julia, and he becomes a part of the organism.
But this is exactly where the cracks start to form, because you simply cannot build a sustainable life on a foundation of silence and projection. Julia has completely projected a life onto William. She wants him to be a professor, a provider, a traditional success. She is writing the entire script.
And William is just passively reading the lines. He doesn't actually want to be a history professor. He really wants to write a comprehensive history of basketball, but that's not considered serious enough for Julia's grand plan.
So the internal pressure just keeps building. And then the first major rupture happens. Charlie dies.
It's sudden, and it completely destabilizes the entire ecosystem of that house. Charlie was the emotional anchor. He was the one who made them feel loved unconditionally. Without him, Rose she checks out.
She basically moves to Florida and leaves her girls alone in Chicago, which is so shocking to read. She just leaves them.
She's done. She has been unhappy for years and years. And with Charlie gone, she just cuts the cord. It's a brutal abandonment. But the real rupture, the one that truly tests the foundation of the sisterhood, is the second one. Cecilia, the artist twin, gets pregnant. And she's a teenager.
And Rose is an incredibly strict Catholic.
Exactly. Rose wants to hide her away. She wants to send the baby away. She sees this pregnancy as a permanent stain on the family, a mark of deep shame. And this is the definitive moment the sisters become their own standalone unit. They circle the wagons around Cecilia. They deliberately choose the sister over the mother.
Cecilia keeps the baby, little Izzy.
Yeah.
And there's this beautiful, defiant detail about how Cecilia starts painting murals of saints, specifically St. Clare of Assisi, as a way to claim her power.
It is absolute defiance through art. She takes her supposed shame and she paints it 10 feet tall on the side of a brick building for everyone to see. But while the sisters are rallying and finding their strength, William is silently crumbling.
Which brings us to part 4, the darkness and the betrayal. Because this is where the story dramatically shifts from a standard family drama into something much, much heavier.
William and Julia have a daughter, Alice. On paper, everything looks perfect, the grand plan is working, but then William's knee gives out.
The basketball injury, the
His
physical
evil.
breaking point.
It completely ends his playing days. And you have to remember, basketball wasn't just a hobby for him, it was his medication. It was the rhythm that kept the ghosts from his childhood away. Without it, the crushing silence of his Boston home comes rushing right back in.
The darkness, as he calls it.
It's a severe depressive episode, but it's very specific in how it manifests. He feels that he is literally infected. He looks at his baby daughter, Alice, and he truly thinks that he is going to contaminate her with his sadness. He views himself as a dangerous pathogen.
That is such a terrifying thought process. It's not that he doesn't love his daughter, it's that he loves her so deeply, he wants to protect her from himself.
Precisely. He genuinely believes the most loving, responsible thing he can do is remove himself from the equation. So he attempts suicide. He walks straight into Lake Michigan, intending to drown.
But he survives.
He survives. But the William who comes out of that freezing water is not the William that Julia married. He is completely broken open. And this is where the central conflict of the book really ignites. Julia, she just can't handle it.
She tries to fix him, though, right? Like she fixes everything else.
She tries to fix him the way a project manager fixes a delay in a schedule. She is incredibly impatient. She sees his clinical depression as a personal betrayal of their life plan. She's annoyed that he isn't getting better on her specific timeline. She just urgently needs him to return to the script she wrote.
And then there's Sylvie.
Sylvie the dreamer. Sylvie, who isn't afraid of messy, ugly emotions. She doesn't try to fix him or rush him. She goes to the hospital and she just sits with him.
This is where that third door concept comes into play.
Yes. Sylvie has always fundamentally rejected binary choices. She didn't want to be a lonely spinster, but she also didn't want to be a traditional, boxed-in wife. She desperately wanted a third option. And in that hospital room, connecting with William on this raw, incredibly vulnerable level, that connection becomes the third door.
They start talking. Like really talking.
Radical honesty. That is the exact phrase the book uses. William has spent his entire life hiding, and Julia has spent her entire life curating. But with Sylvie, William finds he can just be. He tells her all about his sister Caroline, he tells her about the darkness, and she just listens without any judgment. She validates his pain exactly the way Charlie used to validate the sisters.
And that intense emotional intimacy, it eventually turns physical.
It does. William leaves Julia, he moves out, fully believing he just isn't good enough for her or her plans. And he and Sylvie begin a relationship.
We really have to pause here, because this is the ultimate betrayal, right? Sleeping with your sister's husband. It destroys families.
In almost any other book, Sylvie would be painted as the straightforward villain. But Napolitano writes this in a way that makes it incredibly complicated. It is presented as a genuine, true love connection. It's the very first time William feels seen as a whole person. And it's the first time Sylvie finds a love that actually matches the intensity of the novel she reads. They are two deeply broken people who just perfectly fit together.
But the fallout is nuclear.
Absolute scorched earth. Julia discovers the truth. And she doesn't just get mad, she gets aggressively even. She issues a final ultimatum. She takes Alice, the baby, and she moves far away to New York.
And she just cuts him off, completely severs the tie.
Completely. She tells Alice that her father is gone, dead, essentially. She completely erases the past. She builds this impenetrable firewall between Alice and the entire Padavano family. She decides that if she cannot control the narrative in Chicago, she will start a brand new story in New York where she has total, unquestioned editorial control.
Which brings us to part 5 of the deep dive. 2 cities, 2 completely separate lives.
Let's look at the Chicago side first. This is the world of the left behind. William and Sylvie actually get married. The twins, Cecilia and Emmeline, decide to stay close to them despite everything.
It sounds incredibly messy.
It is so messy, but it is also deeply warm. They live a life of messy love. Sylvie works as a librarian. She finally gets to live out the life she always read about. William becomes a physical therapist for the university sports team.
So he actually finds a new relationship with basketball.
He does, and it's a beautiful evolution. He can't physically play anymore, but he can heal the players who do. He finds a way to be around the rhythm and the physics of the game without needing to be the one dribbling. It's a much healthier integration of his past and present.
And the twins really blossom in this environment.
They do. Emmeline fosters babies with her partner Josie, building a family of her own. Cecilia becomes a highly successful muralist. She starts painting massive portraits of the women of her family on buildings all over Chicago.
I love that image so much. The city is literally covered in their faces.
It is a profound way of making the private public, of essentially saying, we are here, we exist, we are absolutely not hiding. It is the exact polar opposite of how the Waters family lived in Boston.
Meanwhile, over in New York,
It is the complete opposite. Julia reconstructs herself entirely. She becomes a high-powered, very successful editor. She raises Alice with this fierce, undeniable love, but it's an incredibly controlling love.
the book describes Alice as having an old soul.
Because she senses the secret. She's remarkably tall, just like William, but she knows absolutely nothing of him. Julia literally intercepts and throws away postcards that the aunts try to send. She blocks any attempt at contact. She's meticulously curating a perfect, shadow-free life for Alice.
She is running.
She is running as fast as she can from Pilsen. She's running from the unmanageable chaos of her childhood home. She's running from the profound heartbreak of her failed marriage. She genuinely believes that if she controls every single variable, she can keep Alice perfectly safe.
But you can't run forever. Time moves on, and it always catches up. And we jump forward to 2008, Part 6, The Diagnosis and the Return.
The dark prophecy they joked about as kids finally comes true. One of the sisters is Beth.
It's Sylvie.
It is Sylvie. She is diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor.
That is just gut-wrenching. After everything, after finally finding her great love, after building this beautiful, messy life.
It's tragic, but it forces the ultimate collision. William knows that Sylvie desperately needs her sister. He knows that despite the ultimate betrayal, the bond of the coven is still the deepest thing in Sylvie's life. So he does the hardest thing. He breaks the silence. He calls Julia.
Just, hello, it's William.
Can you even imagine receiving that phone call after 20 years of absolute silence?
And Julie actually comes back.
She comes back to Chicago. But it is so stiff, it's incredibly awkward. You can't just slap a patch over 2 decades of deliberate silence with a single hospital visit. The ice is just too thick. Julia has spent 20 years building her entire identity on being the one who successfully left, the one who escaped the mess. Returning to it is terrifying for her.
But someone else comes to Chicago, too.
Alice.
Alice finally finds out.
She pieces the truth together. She realizes her father isn't dead at all. And she flies straight to Chicago to meet this massive secret family.
The scene at the playground where they meet,
Yeah.
I truly think this is one of the best scenes in the entire book.
It is completely cinematic. Alice walks up to a neighborhood playground where William happens to be sitting. She's a full adult now. She's exceptionally tall, just like him. And she sees him.
And he sees her.
And for the very first time in her entire life, she sees her own face reflected in someone else. She sees her physical resemblance to this man. It's a very quiet, understated moment, but you feel the earth shift beneath them. She meets the ants. She sees the towering murals.
She literally sees her history painted on the walls of the city.
Exactly. She realizes she isn't just Julia's perfectly curated project. She is a Padavano. She is a Waters. She is undeniably part of this messy, sprawling, beautiful organism.
And then Sylvie dies.
She does, and I think it's very important to note how Napolitano handles this death. It is sad, yes, but it isn't just a tragedy. The narrative focus is entirely on the beautiful life she managed to live. She got her great love, she lived in her truth.
And her death acts as a binding agent for everyone else.
It completely forces the lock to click back into place. Julia finally softens. She has to. She clearly sees that all her rigid control didn't save Sylvie, and it certainly didn't save her marriage. She finally accepts that she cannot control everything in life.
And what happens with Alice?
Alice receives a manuscript that Sylvie wrote before she died. A complete history of the family. It is a literal passing of the torch. Sylvie, who is always the reader and the writer, leaves the true story to the next generation. She ensures that the toxic secrets die with her, but the truth lives on.
And William, what about his arc?
This is honestly my favorite part of the entire resolution. William finally reconnects with his own suppressed past. He finds an old photo of his sister Caroline, the ghost that started this whole cycle of silence. And he takes it to Cecilia and asks her to paint her.
He puts her on the wall.
He permanently acknowledges her existence. He stops hiding from the pain. He brings the ghost completely out of the closet and into the bright light. The family is entirely reshaped. It's missing Charlie, it's missing Sylvie, but it is intact. It survives.
Hello, beautiful.
It's not just a casual greeting anymore. By the end of the book, it's a profound way of seeing people. It's looking at the broken parts and the successful parts and saying, I see you, all of you, and you are worthy of love.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack the big takeaways here for the listeners.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much to say about the different types of love in this book.
There really is. I think the central contrast the author is making is between Julia's version of love and Sylvie's version of love.
Julia's love is very aspirational.
Right. Julia loves who you could be in the future. She loved the esteemed Professor William she was trying to build. She loves the flawless Alice she is molding. It's a very powerful force. It undeniably gets things done and achieves success, but it can be incredibly crushing to be on the receiving end of it. It constantly feels like a performance review.
And Sylvie's love is complete acceptance.
Radical acceptance. She loves who you are right now, exactly in the middle of the mess. She loved William when he was actively suicidal. She loved him when he was broken and lost. And I think the book suggests that we might need a little bit of both in life, but that acceptance is ultimately what heals us.
And then there's the theme of forgiveness.
Forgiveness in this source material isn't about saying, hey, what you did to me was okay. It's about realizing that absolutely everyone was operating from a place of deep trauma. Julia was just trying to be safe from the chaos. William was just trying to disappear to survive his depression. Once they learn to forgive themselves for their own ugly survival mechanisms, they can finally forgive each other.
I also want to talk about narrative control.
Oh, absolutely. Julia tried desperately to write the story of her life. She tried to edit out all the bad parts and the messy people, but life flat out refused to follow her script. William refused to play his part. Sylvie refused to step aside.
The story happened to her in the end, despite all her efforts.
And she eventually had to learn how to live in the unedited version of reality.
Here is a really provocative thought to leave you, our listeners, with. We so often talk about broken homes or broken families as an ultimate tragedy. But in Hello, Beautiful, the betrayal, the affair, the messy divorce, the bitter split was actually necessary for these people to survive.
It is a really tough pill to swallow, but yes, the evidence is there. If William had stayed with Julia and kept pretending, he very likely might have died. He certainly would have remained invisible to himself and his family.
And Julia.
She became incredibly successful and independent, specifically because she left. She found her own formidable strength outside of the coven.
So it begs the question, is a broken family really broken if the pieces reassemble into something much more honest?
Maybe the break is just the bone resetting the way it was always supposed to be.
That is definitely something to think about. But wait, before we wrap up completely, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, because I really feel like there is even more juice to squeeze out of the basketball metaphor we brought up in part 1.
Oh, the geometry of the court. Yes, let's dig into that.
Yes, because we talked about it earlier as noise, as a way to prove he existed. But I think it's also deeply about predictability. In William's childhood home in Boston, emotions were completely random. One day his mother completely ignores him, and the next day she might look at him with active disdain. It's pure emotional chaos.
Right, psychologically speaking, it's an intermittent reinforcement schedule of severe neglect, which is incredibly damaging to a developing brain.
Exactly. But on the basketball court, if you apply X amount of physical force to the ball, it bounces exactly Y high. It's just physics. It's literally the one place in his entire world that does not lie to him.
And that is exactly why the physical injury is so devastating later on. It's not just that he can't exercise or play a game, it's that the reliable laws of physics suddenly stop applying to his emotional regulation. When his knee physically buckles, his entire interface with reality buckles.
Which perfectly explains why he is so uniquely vulnerable to Julia when they first meet. When he loses the structure of basketball, he has no internal structure of his own. Julia offers him that structure. She is essentially a human basketball court for him. She has painted lines, she has strict rules, she has clear boundaries.
That is a brilliant way to put it. She is a human basketball court, and he looks at her and thinks, okay, I know how to play this game. I just follow her rules, stay in bounds, and I'll be safe.
Right, until he realizes that the game is completely rigged, because in her game, he's not actually allowed to be sad.
Exactly. The rules of Julia's court simply do not allow for a permanent injury.
Let's also talk a bit more about the sisters and the Little Women connection. Because you look at it, and it's not just a cute literary homage to make book lovers smile. It's almost a psychological trap they fall into.
It really is a script they are trying desperately to act out. Julia wants to be Jo because Jo is the hero who takes charge. Sylvie wants to be Jo because Jo is the romantic writer. But Napolitano twists the knife here. In the original Alcott book, Beth dies. And it's a tragedy, but it's a very quiet, softly lit 19th century tragedy. In Hello, Beautiful, Sylvie's death is aggressively modern and incredibly visceral.
And the romantic aftermath is completely different, too. In Little Women, Jo ends up marrying Professor Bear.
And in Hello, Beautiful, Sylvie finds her great sweeping love with William. But William isn't Professor Bear at all. He's almost the Laurie character, isn't he?
Boy Next Door. Oh my gosh, yes.
The boy who was always supposed to marry one sister but eventually ends up with the other one.
I didn't even make that connection until just now. In Little Women, Laurie proposes to Jo, she says no, and he ends up marrying Amy.
Here, he marries Julia, who is the Jo figure, but ends up with Sylvie, who is this complex mix of Jo and Beth. Napolitano is brilliantly remixing the classic archetypes to make a point about how fluid these family roles actually are in real life.
That is absolutely fascinating. It adds a whole other massive layer to the betrayal. It's not just a messy affair. It's literary destiny playing out.
It strongly suggests that William was always meant to be with Sylvie, but he absolutely had to go through Julia to get there. He had to be saved and built up by the eldest sister before he could truly be loved by the dreamer.
And let's not forget the title again as we look at these themes. Oh, beautiful. We said earlier it's about seeing the essence of a person. But think about who actually says it. Charlie, the alcoholic father.
The ultimate failure of the family.
Right. Why do we think the author deliberately chose the failure to be the absolute moral compass of the entire book?
Because people who are fundamentally broken often have a much clearer view of the cracks in others. Charlie isn't trying to impress a single person. He has zero pretenses. He is completely stripped bare by his addiction and his failures. And from that place of ultimate vulnerability, he can offer a totally pure, unvarnished love.
Whereas Rose, who is the one desperately holding it all together, can only really offer harsh judgment.
It is a searing critique of respectability politics. Rose is entirely respectable on paper. She goes to church, she pays the bill, she keeps the house immaculately clean. But inside, she is emotionally dead. Charlie is an absolute mess, but he's fiercely emotionally alive. The book consistently asks the reader, Which way is actually better?
I think the answer is pretty clear by the end of the narrative. The sisters might deeply resent Charlie's drinking, but they outright worship his spirit. They fear Rose.
And fear isn't love? It never is.
One last thing on the two cities aspect we talked about, the Chicago versus New York dynamic. It feels very intentional that Julia specifically chooses New York to escape to.
It's the ultimate city of ambition, the city where you can completely reinvent yourself from scratch. You can walk down a crowded street in New York and literally nobody knows who your father was or what neighborhood you grew up in.
And Chicago.
Chicago is the city of deep roots. It's the Midwest. It's very grounded. It's where the mural is permanently painted on the brick for everyone to see. You just cannot hide in Chicago the same way you can in Manhattan.
So Julia naturally runs to the place of anonymity, and the rest of them stay grounded in the place of history.
And eventually, Alice, who is the direct product of all that forced anonymity, begins to desperately crave the history. She craves the brick and the roots.
It's like a homing beacon pulling her back.
It is. DNA is a powerful homing beacon. You can only pretend to be someone else for so long before the truth demands to be known.
Well, this has been just an incredible journey through Hello Beautiful. It is a book that asks a lot of its characters, and quite honestly, a lot of its readers, too.
It explicitly asks us to forgive the unforgivable and the people we love.
And to really find the enduring beauty in the breakdown of things.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for breaking all of this down with me today.
Always a pleasure to be here.
And to you, listening at home or on your commute, go call your sister today, or your brother, or the friend who serves as your chosen family. Just say, hello, beautiful. See what happens when you see them for who they really are.
It might just change your whole story.
Until next time, keep diving deep.